Welcome back to the 10th episode of the Dear Young Men podcast. In today's episode, we are going to talk about charging other people for play dates with your kids, is the world anti-man, and some unsolicited advice about doing the hard thing on Dear Young Men. So we are just going to jump right into it today. I wanted to do an entire satirical piece about last week's Joe Biden versus Donald Trump debate because it was just so hilarious. But I decided against it because I didn't want to get too political. But I thought that was very funny. The country is going down in flames. I messaged somebody I work with and I said, basically, the United States is like that really gifted kid at school that just keeps getting into the bad group crowd. He just surrounds himself with the bad group, but he has all this potential. Like, he could be this great country, and he kind of is this great guy, but he keeps surrounding himself with like the drug dealers and stuff. So that's kind of how I view the United States. I think it's funny. Whatever. If I don't laugh, I'll cry. So let's get right into it. Today, we're going to start with, is the world anti-man? This is the Dear Young Men podcast, so obviously I think that the young men of this world need a better vision of the world for themselves and for the way they treat others, basically. This podcast is called Dear Young Men, and a lot of it is because when I was younger, I wish I knew the things that I know now. And so I'm trying to put those out into the world so that way the younger version of myself can be a few steps ahead where I was at. And that way, instead of being 29 knowing these things, maybe they could be 26 and know these things and just have a little bit of a leg up. So obviously that's why we talk a lot about money. We talk about finances, fitness, fatherhood, and just basically my version and my view of masculinity in the world. So, is the world anti-man? Yes, definitely. No, not really. It's actually hard to determine this whether or not, because there are so many, typically the more established press types where I was looking through articles and I found an article today from Current Affairs and it's titled Against Masculinity by Nathan Robinson. He calls himself a feminine man. I really have no problem with the guy. I was reading the article. I don't really agree with anything that he has to say. It got political, very off the second paragraph. He's already talking about Donald Trump, which is obviously not an ideal version of masculinity. I don't think anybody would look at Donald Trump and think, now that's a guy I want to be, because he's abused women in his life. Whether or not you voted for the guy, he's not a great role model for masculinity. He's an interesting guy because he's sort of taking on an entire he's getting thrown in jail. He's sort of taking on sort of the left-wing establishment, and he's an interesting guy. He's kind of like Moses, who we'll talk about a little bit later. But I don't view Donald Trump as the ideal version of masculinity. Obviously, my version of masculinity would be the Jesus archetype and living a life like Jesus through Jesus. That's what I believe. So, is the world anti-man? Honestly, it kind of is in a way. There's so many people like the Andrew Tates of the world who will they say these things and they act in such a specific way that is so anti the version of masculinity that I would love the world to have. But so it's like that's what they think. The people who think the world is the people who are sort of a little bit anti-masculinity, they look at Andrew Tate and they're against that, which I actually sort of agree with. I also don't like the way Andrew Tate carries himself and the way he acts. I guess to be fair, I only know him from clips and the things that he said. But the more popular clips from the people who like him, I don't really agree with a lot of the stuff that he's done. He's obviously, he's a pimp, he's abused women, and I have two girls, and I'm married to a wonderful woman. So I vehemently against that because that's obviously just wrong. But the way he sort of interacts with the world is definitely interesting. So I would say that modern culture, modern movies, modern sort of everything does push against a more traditional version of masculinity, the guy who carries the world for his family, who sacrifices in silence. They sort of want the more feminine man, the one who will talk about his feelings, who'll cry, who'll show his emotions, which I think that there's a place for that. I think that it's sometimes okay to maybe get a little upset, but you want to be in control. You don't want to just be a blubbering fool all the time, because I think that as the leader of my household, the one who makes the decision, makes the hard decisions in our life, I don't want my kids to see me as somebody who's always crying and he's just always in his feelings all the time. It's sometimes you just gotta man up and just make the hard decision, make the hard play. That is sort of what it means to be a man. Obviously, relating this back to Jesus, who I think we should try to emulate and live through, like that idea is he sacrifices his whole life for all of humanity. He dies on the cross for all sins, for all people, whether you're gay, straight, a feminine man, a masculine man, like it doesn't matter. He dies on the cross for all people, all sins. And so he sacrifices in that way that I think we as men should be sacrificing. And he doesn't, his mother isn't sacrificed. His mother loses a child, which is almost a harder burden to bear than actually dying yourself. But it's like she's called to sacrifice in a different way than he's called to sacrifice. And I think that's sort of the difference between, in my household, sort of how we act is I try to live through Jesus and how he dies on the cross and his version of masculinity. Not that he writes out of, well, he doesn't write anything, but not that any of the apostles wrote down what he like his exact version of masculinity that he believes in. He just sort of lives through that idea and into that idea so that he can become the example of that idea. And so we're trying to live into that example, which we never will. We'll always fall short, but we're trying to live into that example. There's this cliche quote that I don't really like. Hard men create good times create soft men make hard times. I get that quote, but it's like, it's just that stupid quote that like your uncle posts on Facebook. And I don't like it very much at all. I think that it's so unnuanced. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it. But you like, I think men, like hard men, are different. Like each generation needs a different version of a man. Like the leaders of our generation, the leaders from the previous generation were computer nerds. They're the ones who coded. Like they weren't cool. They weren't traditionally masculine men. They were, I guess, they were like dorks kind of in a way. But it's like, that's the version of masculinity that we sort of were shown. Like that's the leaders, the male leaders of the generation before us that we could look up to. They were all, it's Apple, it's Steve Jobs, it's Bill Gates, it's Zuckerberg. It's like those types of men, those were like the big leader types of the culture. And those are a lot different than like the Winston Churchills, the Trumans, those people back in World War II. So you were called to do different things. So the men are called to live a specific way, in a different way, because they're responding and reacting to the culture that's surrounding them. And now, yeah, times are a lot better though. Like we would admit that, yeah, a lot of hard men created these times, but that doesn't mean there aren't still men that could harden up in a more traditional sense, but it also just might not be required in that same sense anymore, which is a more important question. What do we do when things are so good that it doesn't require men to do the things that they're best at, like fighting, military, like those types of very masculine, very aggressive type things? What do we do with those guys? And that's the question. Like we haven't answered that question. We haven't solved that question because we have a lot of men taking their own life. We have a lot of men doing a lot of drugs and then eventually taking their own life. Like we have a lot of people who are desperately needing some sort of value and meaning when these people may have traditionally just gone to war and they would have found their value in that and in a brotherhood and, through like the working out and all that stuff and the family that they create within the military. Those are just gone now. Like they sort of exist in some countries, but in the United States, like we haven't been in a major war since 1945. That's the last time we were in a major war. Every other war since then hasn't really been a big global scale, which is good. But that means that, yes, so there are theoretically soft men, but that doesn't mean that the men aren't willing to step up. It's just the men, I think what they're having problems with is they're not stepping up in their own lives for themselves. It's like it's easy for a guy to step up for his country. It's like an idea they can do it alongside other young men. But when you're a young man yourself and you don't have that big, like where you're doing it with so many other people and you're all trying to carry this burden together, you're called to carry your own cross. Like Jesus, he carries his own cross to the city, the thing that he's going to die in, he carries his own cross to the city. And that's what men are called to do. But now I think men are just having a hard time figuring out what cross to carry. And also they're having a hard time carrying that cross because for one, they don't really have the leadership and the guidance that they might need to carry that cross. But also they aren't, I think it's harder for men to figure out what that cross is for them. And so many men get lost in porn, they get lost in video games. Their lives will just sort of wither away to nothingness because they never found the cross to carry. For me, my cross is like supporting my family and being the leader and the one who sacrifices the most in my family. And that's great. Like that to me, yeah, it's a lot harder. It definitely is. I drive a worse car. All my stuff is a little bit older. Like I don't buy new clothes all the time. I'd rather my kids get them instead. I might not eat first when the meal comes out. But it's like that to me that's the cross that I want that's the cross that I want to carry and the burden that I want to have. And not that I want burden, and I don't want to just be carrying crosses all the time, because like Jesus did die at the end of that story. Like that's how that ends. But in a way, it's like you would almost, as a guy, you sort of look at that and you idealize that idea of like giving your whole self to something to the point of death. I don't think you shouldn't do that. Like your family shouldn't kill you, but like you should be willing to take the bullet for them. So it's weird. Like I think that the biggest problem is that we don't know where or what cross to carry. And I have ideas of how I want people to carry their cross. And obviously throughout my podcast episodes, 10 of them to this point, I'm trying to get that idea across, but it's hard. Like you have to carry your own cross. I can't tell you, well, then pick that one up over there. It's like, you have to figure out what it is for yourself. And for some people, like right now, it's just working out and getting in shape. And then the next cross is like, okay, let me try to like find a woman and settle down and have a family and get a job and raise, get a home and then like raise a family. Like that's like, you have to just figure it out, and it changes along the way. And you're sort of always adding on to it. Just because you work out and get in shape doesn't mean you can drop that, once you get married. So you have to continue to do that to be the example for your family, and you need to live into that example to show that your ideas are good. So I think that at the end of the day, like the hypermasculinity is bad. The anti-masculinity is also bad. So you have to try to find like a mix between the two. And that's hard. I think that it's never been easy. I think that's always been a struggle. That's why there have always been wars, because some men are just so hyper masculine. They want to go to war. That's what they need. And then now it's like more men. They don't want those things anymore. And they sort of have flipped it on its head and gone the complete opposite direction. So we, as a culture, the average dude is just trying to figure out what his cross is and what his cross should be. And I can't tell you what your cross should be. You just have to go looking for it and then be willing and be ready to carry the burden. That's what it comes down to. As a man, you have to be ready to carry that load. And it's going to be hard, and you're going to trip and you're going to fall, and it's going to feel like everybody is attacking you at the same time. But it's worth it, definitely. So don't get lost in porn. Don't get lost in video games. There's so much more to life than those things, but you have to be willing to go out and look for those things, because it's not just going to, like, the cross isn't going to be put on your back every single time. Sometimes it will, and you have to be ready for that, but sometimes you have to be willing to pick it up and put it on your back yourself. All right, so next I wanted to talk about this. It's just basically a quote from the Bible, and it's more than a quote, it's a story, but it's interesting. Like I just sort of want to talk through some of these ideas, and maybe somebody can comment and disagree or agree with what I have to say. So I want to talk about Moses in the burning bush during Exodus, and the story goes, I have the verse here. Basically, Moses is out with his father-in-law, and he sees a bush burning, and it's burning and it's on fire, but it's not burning and withering away like it typically would. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why this bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. And then God said, Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Before this, Moses was put into the river because the Pharaoh was told to kill all male Israelites. There's an order decree to do that. So Moses' mother, stows him away in a basket, puts him in the river, and he is picked up by the Pharaoh's daughter and then raised as a prince, basically. And then he finds out that he's an Israelite. He ends up murdering somebody, and he runs away. So God talks to a murderer and says, he picks him up, he talks to a murderer, and that's why he's hiding his face. Then he said, and then the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers. And he's basically explaining how he's going to help them. And then the thing I think that is the most interesting part of all of this is he says, So go now, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I? "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you.' And they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God says to Moses, "I am who I am." And that's what he says. He says, "I am who I am." He doesn't give him a name. He just says, "I am. I am who I am." And then God also says to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation." He says, "I am." And to me, that's like, it's so, it's always sort of confused me in a way. It's like God says to Moses, he says, "I am who I am. I am." That's what God is. I am. I am who I am, which is all things. He is everything. But he is who he is. So I don't know. It's confusing to me in a way. I've never really fully understood it. I've looked it up. I've read it so many times, and I don't totally understand it. I think it's omnipotentness of God. I think that's what it is. But it's like so much more than that, because he asks for a name. Who sent me? I am. Who sent me? That's who sent me, is I am sent me. And that's what he tells Moses to call him. Another thing to note about this is that God chooses broken people, proving that God, just because you have sinned and you have failed in your life and you have done something wrong, that doesn't mean that he will leave you forever. He hasn't left you yet. You just have to reach your hand back out to him, and he will pull you towards him. But you have to be willing to be pulled. You have to be willing to reach your hand out. And that's like Moses is a murderer. He killed somebody. He killed we are all designed in God's image, so he killed one of God's people. And he still reaches out to him, and he's the one that leads the Israelites out of Egypt. He's the one that frees the slaves. But he's obviously a sinner, and he's a broken man, and he killed somebody. Like, I've never done anything that bad, but he still calls on him, and he's the one that like leads, and he's the one that leads the Jews out of Egypt. So it's such an interesting passage. It's something just to think about. I am who I am. That's what God is, and he will be there for you whether you're a broken person or not. He is who he is. All right, so next I wanted to react to a very, very funny video that I saw. This woman, she makes this post and puts it on the internet, and let's just watch it and then we'll react to it at the end.
Can we normalize sending the other family money for play dates? So recently, my daughter had a friend over, and I asked her mom for money, and this is how it went. So after the play date, I texted her mom and I said, "Thanks for letting Jamie play today. Please help out with your share of the expenses for the play date, totaling $15 via Venmo. Let's do it again sometime, because I can't keep doing these play dates if it's so expensive." And she said, "Expenses?" And I said, "Yeah, she used supplies and food while she was here. And this way we can do this more often without a monetary obligation on just one party, right? Makes sense." Now, she didn't say much, but she did say what supplies. And of course I wrote them down. There was chalk, applesauce, fruit. She sat on the couch, so that's wear and tear. She actually broke a toy. She had 3 juice boxes. She went to the bathroom. She had yogurt. Then she actually sent the money, and I sent her a message thanking her for it, of course. She didn't say anything else, but I said, this will make it easier for us to do more play dates in the future. So what do you guys think?
She asks at the end there, what do we think? Well, I think this is just about the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard in my entire life. All right. It's so funny. So I'm going to go through her little itinerary list here of items and the value of them. This lady's crazy. So the first one, chalk, $1. Applesauce, $1. Fruit, $1. Sat on couch, wear and tear, $1. I don't know how she's figuring out how like the wear and tear on a couch and how this one girl sitting on it one time equates to $1. So you have to think like a couch. You have a couch on average. I mean, we've had our couch now for like 3 years. We'll probably have it for like, 10 years or something. So you have to break down the cost of it. Let's say it costs $1,000. Mine was free. We got it as a gift. And then I'm too cheap to buy a new one. So we'll keep this one for a while. It's a nice couch though. So let's say you spend $1,000, 10 years. So that's $100 a year. That breaks out to like 33 cents a day, 30 cents a day of wear and tear if you have the couch for 10 years. So she sat on the couch for 4 hours, let's say at most, of a 24-hour day. So if I'm nitpicking here and I'm trying to agree with this woman, I would say that realistically, she probably only actually owes about 6 or 7 cents, and it's not fair because she's not the only one that sits on it. So she really only owes like 2 cents, but she charges her $1 because she sat on the couch. That's hilarious. Like, to actually think about that, like, to come up with that is so absurd that I kind of admire this woman's hustle. She's probably like she probably made a lot of money in her life. Very high powered business exec, the type to just like, well, my time is worth money, so that's like, I'm gonna charge you for that. No free handouts from this lady, which I can kind of respect in a way. Next, broke an LOL doll, $5. So she broke a doll. Obviously, kids' toys are super cheap, hard to replace, or easy to replace. So $5, I get that. You break a toy, it's gonna happen sometimes. 3 juice boxes, $2. I don't know the cost of juice boxes. Those are crazy bad, very high sugar. So our kids do not have them. I don't want them to have cavities. They could drink water, but you gotta charge them for water too. So the juice boxes cost, that's okay. 3 trips to the bathroom, $3. That means every time I go to the bathroom in my house, it costs me $1, which that's not true. If it cost me $1, I'd be spending like, I don't know, you go to the bathroom, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 times a day. Like, you go pee a couple times, you go number 2 a couple times, or once or whatever. $1 each time. So that means everybody in my house, every time they go to the bathroom, it costs me $1. I didn't even think it costs that much, and my kids have diapers. No, that's wrong because it doesn't cost $1. It probably costs mere pennies. But let's say it does cost $1 each time, then I see where she's coming from. Yogurt, $1. And the lady actually sends the money probably because she's like, well, my kid's never going to see this. I'm never going to see this woman ever again. So I'll just send her the money. That way I don't have to deal with this. It's $15. It's not a ton of money, but that's more than what I spend at Chipotle. So it kind of is a lot of money. To me, that would bug me so much. Like, I would send it and I'd say, I'm never talking to this woman ever again. Or I'm a little vindictive, so I would try to get her back and like invite her kid over and then like make sure that she breaks something sort of expensive and then be like, sorry, she broke a $50 toy. I mean, I know that you're going to try to nickel and dime me and say the value of the toy is really only worth $8 now because of the wear and tear before, but the initial price was $50 retail. I did get it 25% off, and then I also had a $10 gift card. So technically, I only spent like $25. But at the end of the day, it's like we have to go off of retail value. That's sort of how you did the couch situation. But the thing is that I think is funny is she's missing so many things. So you think air conditioning, electrical, like that type of stuff. Your electrical bill is like $200 a month. That's more than $1 a day. That's more than $10 a day. That's like $15 a day. Or sorry, that's less. That's $6 a day, and she's one person. Like that, there should have been charged for that. Wear and tear on hardwoods. Like I have hardwoods in my house, and like that stuff does wear and tear. Probably not $1 worth, but definitely a little bit. Door hinges, you have to think about every time she actually like put the door handle down and then open the door. That's wear and tear. She should have added that in. Like she should have had a miscellaneous wear and tear. So I think electrical. I think she should have added something for the doors, the floors. Let's see, like, what else, too? Like, it depends if she was in the grass, too. It's like, you have to maintain that grass. How much did your lawnmower cost? How much does the gas cost to, like, use that lawnmower? And that's sort of a thing that you need to sort of figure out that cost. I think you could throw in another $1 for that. And then I think after that's pretty much good. But, yeah, you definitely want to – I think she's missing out on several things here. This is crazy. This kid will never have friends. I feel so bad for this poor girl. She will never be able to make friends because her mom will keep charging and nickel and diming people. This is just the most ridiculous thing ever. You invited somebody over, you cover the expenses. That's the whole point. It's like inviting somebody out to dinner and then they pay their own thing. You're supposed to pay. If you invite somebody to dinner, you pay for it. Whether it's just your friend or your wife or your girlfriend, whatever, like that's like sort of traditional. Like you're supposed to just pay for the person that you invited out. Like when I invite my friend out for a meal, it's like I'm fully expecting to pay for his meal. I'm the one inviting him. I want to hang out with him. And so that's like sort of the courtesy. I thought that was the courtesy. This woman's crazy. Don't be like this woman. Oh, this is kind of funny. All right. So those are the 3 topics today. The next thing that comes up is the comment section. And we have nothing on the comment section. That's okay. 10 podcasts in. We have had a few comments, which is really cool. We've had some views. One video did really well. Some videos haven't done all that great, but it's fun just to see a little bit of growth with the podcast. It's very cool. If you are watching, I appreciate it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening to podcasts, don't forget to follow. all that jazz. All right, and now we'll do the quote of the day. This quote, I'm going to sort of self-promote one of my own videos because I'm just sort of like that. All right, the quote of the day is from Socrates. I only know one thing, and that is that I know nothing. And I made an entire video about this idea, about how the older I've gotten, the less I've realized I know. And that's what this video is about. So we're going to listen to the video, and then I'm going to give a few more thoughts at the end. 10 years ago, when I was a chubby, pimple-faced 18-year-old, I knew everything. I knew how to live a good life. I knew the answer to every problem someone could have. And I was always the smartest guy in the room. Then I went to college, and I found out that I knew even more than I thought. My notions about the way life worked were confirmed, and I just kept knowing all there is to know. Flash forward to today, and I found out that I know nothing. Socrates once said, "All I know is that I know nothing." Tell that to 18-year-old Scott, and I would tell you why he was wrong. Tell that to 28-year-old Scott, and I'll shake my head agreeing with him. The older I get, the less I know. I'm not sure when I got so dumb, somewhere after finding out my wife was pregnant with my first child, and now.
You're pregnant?
Maybe when you bring new life into the world, it humbles you. Maybe holding that new baby for the first time tells you that you are no longer the most important thing in your world. You begin to realize that you are Atlas, and that baby in your arms is the world. Before I held my baby for the first time, I was a great parent. I knew all there was to know about parenting, just how easy it was going to be. But the older I get, the less I know. On March 19th, 2022, I walked into the hospital a cynic. A day later, on March 20th, after 24 hours of labor, my wife was cut open to save the life of my daughter. And the first thing she said when they told her was, "Is my baby going to be okay?" I think in that moment I realized that my life is not more valuable than my kids, and in fact my kid's life means more to me than my own. I guess I kind of missed that naive Scott, the smart one who knew everything. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the older I get, the less I know. Wow, what a great video. That guy, you should subscribe and like that video and maybe go check out his channel. So basically the idea for that video, it sort of just hit me one day after work. I was just sitting there and I was sort of like weirdly sitting in the hallway in my basement, just like thinking about trying to force myself to come up with something. And then that just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, this is the video. I'm going to make this video. This is the script. This is what I'm going to make. This is awesome. This is a great video idea. The idea behind that video basically is that the older I've gotten, the more dumb I realize I actually am. When I was a kid, I was very arrogant. I thought I knew everything. And then as you get older, you live more life and you realize like, oh my gosh, I know nothing. And I'm sure I'll think that I know even less in a few years from now. It's such an interesting idea. It's such a great video that I made. I'm so talented. You could just tell the sound design. No, seriously though, it's one that's actually probably my favorite video I've ever made. It means so much to me, and it's very personal to me. Obviously, like when my daughter was born, it's a deeply personal video to me because it's my life and it's basically my journey through life, realizing that I thought I was way smarter than I was, and then I got to college, and like sort of the things in college that I was taught, like they kept reaffirming my current beliefs and the things I thought I already knew. And I did really well in college, and it was very easy. And I was like, oh, this is like, I'm just good at life. That's literally what I thought at a period of time in my life. Not that I am good at life, but I literally thought like, man, I'm just good at this. Like, I don't even try at school, and I'm on the dean's list and all this stuff. And then I like got a little bit older, and I had a job and whatever. And then like life was still like, I don't know, in a way it was almost easy, and everything was just going so well. And then I had a kid, and my wife was pregnant. She got pregnant, and just in that moment, something flicked. Like there was some switch. Like we got back from our 4th of July trip. It's like one of the last trips we went on. And something like a switch flipped in my head where it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. Like I literally don't know anything. And I don't know exactly when that moment of the switch flipping happened, but it was like, this is real now. Like there's a baby in my wife's stomach. And then like during the whole labor was a very long, arduous process. She was 41 and a half weeks, and they were telling us about this and this and this. And she was a very large baby, and like they had to do an emergency C-section 26 hours into the labor. So it was just a very stressful time. But it's like in that moment, all I cared about, like, I didn't care about, not to be mean to my wife, but I literally didn't care about my wife in a way. It's like, okay, I want her to be safe. But it was like, can I do anything? Like, can you take me instead and like make sure my baby's okay? And like, can we do like a trade? And it was weird. Like, there's a moment that just a switch flips and you realize that like you aren't the most important thing in your life. Your ideas and the things that you think they're not necessarily wrong, but it takes a real person, I think, to re-examine those things and to look at the way they were living life. And I deeply regret the way I lived back then when I thought I was so good at everything, because I was wasting so much time. Like, I deeply regret the way I was because I was just so wrong about so many things. It's life though. Like, that is how you always look back and you think, oh, I'm a little embarrassed about that. Or you always have regrets, whatever it may be. But I don't know. It's an interesting video. It's basically what's said in that video is what I wanted to say. It's a short video. It's 2 minutes. If you have a minute, check it out on the Scott Schroeder channel. It's my face with a yellow background. It's an interesting video. I really like it, and it means a lot to me. And I think that that's like sort of the way life goes, is you think you know everything, and then as you get older, you just realize you know less and less and less. And sort of as the years go by, the more books I listen to, the more books I read, I'm like, wow, I don't know anything about anything. Literally, I don't know anything about anything. You just sort of wing it. And you try to figure it out. All right, and finally, we are getting to the final section of the podcast, which is the unsolicited advice section. And today's unsolicited advice is do the hard thing. There's a quote from David Goggins. I like David Goggins, but I'm like a huge fan, but I know of him and I like some of the things that he says. And it is, who's going to carry the boats and the logs? And he's sort of saying, it's funny, like the way he's doing it, he's like doing things and he's got his coach there going, and he's saying, who's going to carry the boats and the logs? And he goes, you are, David. It's very funny. Like, it's a hilarious video. I love it. I've like put it into some of my videos before because I just think it's so funny. The idea though of doing the hard thing, I think that's sort of the way I've been trying to live my life recently. I think in the past, it's so easy to just choose the easy thing. And I think in a way, you could say that the easy thing and the easy way out is like the temptations of the devil. I don't know if for sure that that's what it is, but you could say that. To do the easy thing, to do the thing that feels the best is, I think, in my opinion, is the temptation of the devil. And so, for example, if you are somebody who is addicted to porn and you just want to watch it, that's just what you want to do, and you want to do everything that goes along with that. To not do that is the hard thing. That's the hard thing. So choosing the hard thing day in and day out. You don't want to work out today because you're tired. You didn't sleep very well last night. Your kid woke you up 19,000 times in the middle of the night. Yes, I'm talking to my kids personally if they ever listen to this. And I think that there's something about still choosing to do the hard thing. What you show to yourself, what you prove to yourself is that you are worth it. And you are treating yourself like you're worth it. So you don't watch porn that night or that day, whatever. You're showing yourself that you're worth it. You're better than that. If you're somebody who goes to the gym, you're proving to yourself that you're worth it. You're better than that. If you choose to do the hard thing where you're the one sacrificing for your family, you're the one that drives the worst car, you're the one that has the worst clothes, you're the one that, has the worst stuff, whatever it may be, you're the one proving that you are worth it. And yeah, while you might not be getting the best stuff, it's like, what's the thing that matters the most to me is my family and carrying them on my shoulders. So sacrificing and doing the hard thing is proof to them that they are worth it in your eyes and that they mean so much to you that you are willing to live a worse life for them so that way they can live a better life, so that way that you can prop them up on your shoulders. That's the idea. That's the idea of lineage. That's the idea that we've had for thousands of years, where your kids should stand on your shoulders and you should prop them up. You should push them up. Recently, a culture that's much more center focused, me focused, that's not the idea anymore. It's not stand on my shoulders. It's I'll show you the path a little bit, but then you got to figure it out on your own. And you do have to figure it out on your own. There's a point to that. But also at the same time too, like, you are supposed to raise your kids up. You're supposed to raise your family up. Even if that means sometimes you slip down and you get pushed into the mud a little bit more. That's the whole point. It's like you're supposed to push them up and do the hard thing. So I would implore you to just throughout your day, just make the hard decision. You're deciding between McDonald's and going home and cooking something. Cook something. That's harder. You're deciding between eating a cupcake or skipping it. Skip it. That's the harder thing. You're deciding between not going to the gym and going to the gym. Go to the gym. That's the hard thing. You're deciding between lifting a few extra pounds at the gym or just sort of calling it quits. You've done good enough. Do the extra rep. Do the hard thing. And because you do the hard thing enough. You do the hard thing enough times throughout a day, throughout a week, throughout a month, throughout a year, throughout a decade. And you could see, you could build a mountain just on the hard things that you chose to do. So wake up today and choose to do the hard thing. Tomorrow, just choose to do the hard thing. Because the hard thing, that's what builds mountains. That's what builds families. That's what builds a human. That's what builds men. This is a Dear Young Men podcast. I'm a guy. That's what built me. And I fail sometimes. I just recently posted a video on my other channel about how I've been avoiding the hard thing. I've been stuck in the good enough zone. This idea that you do something hard for a little bit and then you just sort of peter out because you're not seeing the results you thought you would see. Or, even the results you see are good, but this is hard and I kind of just want to, eat like crap, or I want to stop doing this thing because it's a lot of time and blah, 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 whatever excuse you can come up with. Do the hard thing. Stop making excuses because your life will be better for it. Thank you for watching. This has been, or listening. This is Scott with the Dear Young Men podcast. If you like it, please share, please like, please comment, please subscribe. If you are somebody who likes to make shorts and clips of this podcast, please go for it. I will not stop you. I will not copyright strike you. I won't do anything. I think that'd be awesome if you wanted to take some of my clips and post them. Just don't take them out of context. Make me look like a fool, because then I'll find you and I'll hunt you down. I mean, I'm still not going to copyright you because whatever. But I don't really care. All right. Thank you for watching and listening so much. And I will see you guys next week, next Tuesday, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Peace.